All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alyssa Chow, and I'm an attorney here in the Sacramento area. And I have a special guest here today. This is Shannon Downs, and she is a California licensed professional fiduciary. And so today we'll just be discussing, what are fiduciaries or private fiduciaries? What do they do, and what services do they provide? So if you are not familiar with me, though, this is my fourth presentation this year with ACC. I've given a couple of previous presentations on Wills and Trusts 101 and just describing different estate planning documents. And so later in our presentation, I'll talk a little bit about those documents and how Shannon actually, or someone like Shannon, can step in and be really helpful or step into a position of assistance for any of those documents. I am from this area, so I have done a lot of work with ACC in the past, volunteered probably 20 years ago, and have kept up my relationship with ACC ever since then. So, and as per usual, if you haven't seen any of my past presentations, my mom, Sue Chow, always demands a shout out. So if anyone is on the pickleball courts at ACC and you happen to see her, please do go up to her and say hello and ensure her that I gave her the requisite shout out that she requests every time. All right. And Shannon, if you want to say a little bit about yourself.
So thanks for having me. So I'm a fiduciary. I'm born and raised in this area. In fact, I actually grew up in Greenhaven. I went to Kennedy High School. I'm not going to say when I graduated, but so I love this area. I mean, it's, my hometown. So I, love being here. And I think this is a fantastic community center. And I've been to some events here before, and I really like the people here and the energy and all the services that they provide. So when they asked me to do this, I was definitely excited to be part of this. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, great. Thank you for being here. And also just a little bit about me too. So I'm an attorney in the area, and I've been practicing for about 6 years now. And Shannon, like I said, is a professional fiduciary. So Shannon, if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got in this area, that'd be great.
Yeah, so most people haven't really ever heard of a fiduciary unless they're doing estate planning documents or something. So if you have never been in that role before or been doing that before, then you've never heard of it. So when I tell people I'm a fiduciary, they always kind of give me a quizzical look. They're not really sure what that means. They think maybe I do financial advising and planning, and that's only part of it. So basically, what I do is I help people. So I really enjoy working with people and helping them, assisting, elderly people, children, all of that in these different roles. And how I got into it was actually sort of a roundabout way. I didn't really know what a fiduciary was before until my dad got sick. And I started, assisting him. And actually, I was working with Alyssa and another attorney and kind of going through some of the things that you have to do when you're assisting someone who's, especially your parent, who's starting to get sick and you're not really sure how to help them. And it's a very awkward time to sort of be taking the reins, from child to start to becoming the parent to your parent. It's a little awkward. And so I didn't really know much about it. So as I was helping my dad and kind of going through that, I was working with the attorneys and they were telling me, if you should be a fiduciary, this is what they do. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really hard, and going through all this. But I think once I got through all of that, I realized how important it was to have these skills and understanding of what older people need as they age and some ways to help them and protect them. So that's how I got into it, and I love it.
Great. All right. So I guess we'll dive right into our presentation then. So the first topic that we want to talk about then is, what is a professional fiduciary?
So there's a definition up on the screen, but really what I'm there to do is to sort of fill in where maybe a family member can't or isn't available or they just don't have someone. And I help, like I said, with helping with elderly, disabled, children sometimes, and I assist them with, different issues that might come up, housing issues, medical needs, making decisions, helping with finances, and in other aspects. And so I work in those realms to try and make sure that they're protected in different areas. So whatever comes up. So as far as who can serve as a professional fiduciary, so in order to become one, there's some requirements and things that you have to go through. So I didn't study to become a fiduciary, so I had to kind of take a lot of the experience I had had from before and also having a 4-year degree. But there's some things that kind of go into it because it's a really important position and you're given a lot of responsibility. So they want to make sure that the people that they have set up have certain requirements filled. So first one is a 4-year degree. And then, they do a background check, so no criminal history. And then they have a certification course that you actually have to go through and take some courses because even though you may have a degree and it's not really specific as to what the degree needs to be into, but they just want to make sure that you've gone through and gotten formal education. But you also have to get certified, and then we take tests. So just like nurses and other people to get licensed, you have to take an exam, and we actually have a 2-part exam, so it's California specific and then nationwide. Not every single state has licensed fiduciaries, so sometimes they're known also by different names, but not all states have them. So some do, but so you still have to know some of the national regulations. And so to get licensed in California, you have to take these tests. And then the other thing is you have to be able to be bonded. So that's where you are given the responsibility of a certain amount of money. And then you have to be basically found to be sort of credible and have good references and good credit to be bonded. We also are required to carry errors and omissions insurance. And that's a really important thing to have because when we're dealing with people's finances, there's a lot of room for sometimes error and just, mistakes and things, and we want to make sure that we're doing our best job. And if something were to ever happen where we were managing someone's money or something, and something happened that was maybe no fault of our own, then the good thing is that we're insured and we have that backup. So if something happened, our clients would be covered. And then also we have to get our licenses get renewed every year. And so we do go through that sort of process of having the board. It's the bureau that's run by the California Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, and they oversee us. And so they'll review our license every year, and if there were any complaints or anything, then that would be brought to light. And then also they just make sure we've had all of our continuing education credits for the year. So a lot to do to become one.
It's okay. Then you can trust whoever is a fiduciary because they've gone through quite a bit in order to get to where they're at.
Yeah, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. So, which is important because we are put in very important positions, and so it's important that we go through that rigorous sort of background screening.
Yeah, absolutely, and ongoing as well.
Yes, ongoing every year, lots of credits.
Okay. And then, a lot of the times, like you said, whenever you tell people that you're a fiduciary, a lot of the times they say, okay, well, what do you do?
Right.
What services do you provide? And so
it's a mouthful. So I always say that the term fiduciary really is just sort of a general term, but you might know us by a lot of different names. For instance, you may have heard of a trustee, an executor, a conservator, a guardian, somebody paying bills. You may have also heard of power of attorney, and there's actually 2 different types of power of attorneys. We've got finance and healthcare. The other is just maybe I'm being a consultant, assisting families looking for resources for their elderly parents or disabled family members. And then also just doing case management, so overseeing their care. So those are some of the actual names of these different types of roles that we might be in under a fiduciary, but those are some of the names you may have heard. And Alyssa, you might want to tell them what some of these actually, what these documents are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if no one has, or if you haven't appeared or seen any of my previous presentations on wills and trusts, I'll go over really quickly what a trust is, what a will is, and some powers of attorney, and kind of how Shannon or a fiduciary like her could step in those positions. You'll notice at the top we have a trust listed. And so a trust is really going to be a really critical document. One thing that I always say is that really what we're trying to do with that type of document is avoid any sort of probate court involvement. And for someone who, while you have capacity and you're able to manage your own finances, it's great, right? You can make your own decisions. You don't need someone else to step in for you. But it's possible that at some point in the future, you could become incapacitated, whether temporarily or possibly permanently. Some examples of incapacity would be if you were diagnosed with a cognitive deficit like dementia or early, onset Alzheimer's. And so, there's lots of different situations that might come up where you might need somebody to be able to step in and really assist you with your financial matters. And with a trust, that would be any assets that you've actually titled into your trust that will then follow the instructions of your trust. And so if you need somebody to be able to step in for you, and maybe you don't have another family member or someone else that you really feel comfortable stepping in for you, then a trustee can be appointed that you've already chosen ahead of time. And that could be someone like Shannon, who you've spoken with ahead of time, discussed what her services are and what her role could be. And if you do become incapacitated, then any of those assets that are titled in the name of your trust can be managed by her. So she can, deal with investment accounts and make sure that they're still properly invested, get set up with bill pay, all kinds of different services depending on the types of assets that are actually connected to the trust. And so that's just one example of a document that's going to be helpful during lifetime. Now, even after you've passed away, a trust is important as well, because in order to avoid the probate court, as long as you have assets properly connected to your trust, then Shannon, someone like Shannon, can step in and be the manager, the trustee, to step in and basically make sure that whoever your designated beneficiaries are will receive their assets and their inheritance according to your very specific instructions. That's a really high level, very quick summary of what a trust is and how Shannon would play, what role she would play in that type of document. But, that type of document is going to be helpful during life and after you've passed away. Now, when it comes to the powers of attorney for finances and medicine or medical related needs, those documents are only going to be effective for you during your lifetime, but they're going to fill a very important gap that perhaps the trust doesn't fill. So there's some assets like retirement accounts or life insurance policies that you actually can't retitle into a trust during your lifetime or connect to a trust during your lifetime. And so those types of accounts may pass by beneficiary designation, but that only happens upon your passing. So if you do become incapacitated and you need help dealing with your RMDs or dealing with any tax issues or any bills that are separate from a trust, then a power of attorney for finances is going to be really important. And that person is essentially stepping in and really handling your financial life, so to speak, right? You maybe you can talk about some of the things that, steps that you take when you do step in that role.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a really important thing to have the right person that would be managing those bills and finances for you. And so, and just so you know, the authority that we get has to come from those documents. So, as Alyssa was describing, the different documents that are usually within an estate plan, when people come to me and they say, I'm looking for someone to name as a fiduciary in a trustee role, and I say, okay, great. So in what capacity do you want me to serve? And they say, oh, well, let's take a look at the document. So we go through it and I'll say, okay, so you need a trustee. How about power of attorney for finance? And they'll say, well, I might be able to have my son do this or whatever. And then they think, and I say, okay, that's great. But just so you know, so that person, if you're incapacitated or if for some reason, even if it's just a temporary thing, like some clients, what they'll do is, if they have a surgery or something they know that's coming up and they're concerned about maybe not being able to pay bills while they're maybe in skilled nursing or recuperating, you can name someone to have immediate powers. And so what we do is, as long as I'm listed in there and I'm given that immediate authority, then I can take that to the bank and the different financial institutions and show them that I have the authority, and then I can actually start doing business. But without those documents, it's impossible you can't even contact, say, AT&T, a utility company, anything. They won't talk to you unless you're on those documents. So it's really important when you're looking at those documents that your attorney is preparing, you understand what all the different roles are, the trustee, the executor, the power of attorney for healthcare, and for finance. So, and we can serve in all of those roles or just some of them. So I have a lot of families who maybe they have family members that can serve as their healthcare advocate, And so they don't need me in that role, but they definitely want me to serve as finance, power of attorney, and also as trustee. And that's fine. I'm happy to serve in any of those roles, all of those roles. And so if you do want that, that's great. And so we'll go through all the sort of the steps to make sure I have the right information. But I can also be listed as a backup to all those people. So let's say you have family members that you want to list first. Well, you can list them, but if for some reason they can't serve, you can always list me as a backup, as a successor trustee or a backup power of attorney.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, during lifetime, there are different roles, like you said, that you could possibly step into. Now, you did mention also the executor position, right? And so, in the context of someone who maybe only did a last will and testament or who did not do any estate planning documents at all, that would be a situation where Shannon may step in post-death in order to manage any estate assets and ultimately get them to the heirs at law or whoever the beneficiaries are. A big question that I get a lot of the time is what's the difference between a trust and a will? And sort of the very simple response that I can give to that is a trust is going to be effective for you during your lifetime and after your death, whereas a will is only going to be effective upon your death or after your death. But someone like Shannon could step in and handle the filing of the final income taxes, dealing with the probate court if the estate warrants a probate administration, and then also just keeping the family informed, but really dealing more with the business side of, post-death administration.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot.
Okay.
So sometimes people aren't really sure, why they need to hire one or what would be an instance where they might want to have a trustee fill in, a professional fiduciary fill in, and in some of those roles where they normally would think that a family member or friend would fill in. And so there's a few reasons why we may want to do that. So one is to assist with bill paying. Like I said earlier, if you know that you're going to be going in for a surgery, or if, a lot of people, unfortunately, were going through a lot of trouble with COVID. And so maybe they were really sick for a while and they were having a hard time. Other people too, they start to slow down a little bit when they get older. So I'd say that having somebody there to assist them, even if it's temporary, and that's fine, or they might decide that they're done paying bills. They don't go on their computer anymore. They don't check email as much anymore. They just don't want to be bothered with it. So I'm happy to step in and make sure that those things are getting paid. The other reason is that you might need assistance with, and so this is one of those things that's we can serve in a support role. So for instance, getting resources. So one of the things I try and do with my clients is to keep them as independent as possible for as long as they want to be independent. And that might mean wanting to stay in their homes and not move into assisted living, or maybe they're eventually going to do that, but in the meantime, we want to make sure that they're going to be safe in their homes. So what I can come in and do is talk to them about some things that might be dangerous, and we can hire some providers. And so we can find in-home care workers. I can find people to give rides, someone to come in and maybe do companion caregiving, those types of things. So that might be a helpful time to have somebody that would be able to help you. The other is protecting people from predators. So one of the things that I find is a lot of my clients, when they get older, they start to rely on more people for basic things: rides, places, groceries, shopping, going to doctor's appointments, and things like that. That can be a definite time when somebody is more prone to someone who might start to prey on them a little bit. And sometimes it's not really intentional, sometimes it is, but people who are starting to rely on the services of others in that regard, they might feel uncomfortable saying no for requests, maybe for money or items in their home from people that are taking care of them. The other thing is predators, sometimes people's adult children will start coming to them as they see that they're losing capacity and start asking for money and things that they never would have done before, because those family members maybe were really very frugal and they never would have given money before. And all of a sudden we start to see big checks being written out. And so as a financial protector, if I'm working and doing their bills, I'm going to definitely see where there might be some discrepancies. And so I keep a watch out for that. So that's another thing that I like to do is keep an eye on those types of things. And then the other is minimizing conflict. So we have all heard of families where maybe, I don't know, they get along for the most part, but maybe there's a little tension there. Maybe that there's someone who's going to be put in charge and not everyone else agrees. There can be a lot of instances of that. And so we're finding more and more that by putting these sort of administrative responsibilities on a non-family member, someone who is a neutral third party, it takes a lot of the strain off of relationships of the siblings and extended family members that might be called in. So that's another really good reason why you might want to bring someone in.
Yeah, and part of the relationship that Shannon and I have and how we know each other is because as an attorney, sometimes I will step in and actually represent Shannon on cases where she's been asked or called upon in cases of conflict where maybe there's 4 siblings and they're in 2 different camps. You've got 2 siblings who think that the house needs to be sold, and you've got 2 siblings who think that mom or dad need to stay in the house for as long as possible. And maybe mom or dad didn't have estate planning documents in place that provided for who they wanted to step in. And so an example would be Shannon coming in and basically being that neutral third party who doesn't really have any skin in the game, right? She's stepping in to basically just follow whatever the instructions are and do whatever is in the best interest of her client, right, at the time.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, is that my concern is to make sure that my client is well taken care of, and also to make sure that all of the family members understand my role and understand that I'm only following the direction of their parents. And so that really does sort of take a lot of the heat off of the other family members that might have been put in a position to make tough choices. And so usually that really makes people a little less edgy about that kind of thing. And so and I'm required as a fiduciary to be represented by an attorney because lots of times things come up. We need guidance. She understands the law. She understands how the trusts are written. And so she helps give me guidance. I also hire other professionals. So when I'm working on someone's trust, or if I'm working in bill pay or whatever, what I do is I reach out to other professionals. So whether it's a CPA to do taxes, financial advisors if we're going to be working on investments, and accountants to accounting. So I'm required actually to branch out and use other professionals to assist me in my job. And also it's another way to protect you as my client, because you understand that there's going to be a lot of different professionals that are going to be working and sort of overseeing what's being done. And so it's great teamwork when we can get a lot of good very good minds together, all kind of working on the same project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm assuming you'd agree with me on this, but, in a lot of cases where we are working together and a fiduciary comes in and there's a team of professionals that are all working together, it seems like there's a lot of new parties that are getting thrown into the mix. But in fact, it actually lends itself to much more efficiency as far as time goes, because we all know what the timelines are for how, if it's a probate matter, how quickly we need to be moving. If it's a trust administration, we are very mindful of what our lack of restrictions or some restrictions are going to be in that situation. And so, what we actually have we were just talking about it before this, there was a case before that was a probate matter and family members just couldn't get along. And I think that case had been going on for about 8 years by the time we brought you in. And then we were able to get it done and a settlement among all the parties, because Shannon was a neutral third party, agreement among all the beneficiaries and heirs within less than a month, or I'm sorry, not a month. That's really fast.
That would be crazy, but yeah.
Less than a year. It was probably about a year or so by the time we closed it up. So,
which is still amazing, considering how long they had waited to resolve that. And people can't move on, especially when there's assets and money and different things being tied up. It can really be a drain on people to have this sort of looming unfinished business. So we like to go through and make sure things are done in a timely manner. And because I've done it so many times and we've done it together so many times, we're just like a fine-tuned engine, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the other benefit of having a fiduciary do the job that maybe you might want to have thought of putting a family member or friend in there, is that they've never done this before. So it might be just not something that they feel comfortable with or really just sure themselves. And of course, they would have to be represented by an attorney as well. But I think that it's just a lot harder when you've never done it. You don't know what to expect.
Right.
Things come up, you're not sure how to deal with it. So we understand the process, and we're going to be able to get this finished and administered and closed for everybody's benefit, so we can all move on.
Right. Yeah, and then I think another benefit to a lot of the heirs and just to the family members is that if we can do it in an efficient way and in a way that minimizes any potential acrimony among the parties, it will actually result in fewer fees to everyone. Because what we hate to see is parties, let's say one child gets appointed and maybe they have one sibling or multiple siblings who just don't agree with how they're handling it, and then they all get their own attorneys, and then 2 or 3 years later everyone spent about $100,000 or more in just attorney's fees, and it just means that everyone, whatever their parents were trying to leave for them has been significantly reduced due to all of that conflict. And so, it's good to get a neutral third party in to try to minimize that and kind of speed things up.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I will be called in sometimes in situations like with that one probate, and then trust administrations where one of the siblings has been put in charge, everyone's upset, it's been dragging on, and now they're going through litigation or something. And that costs the trust a lot of money as well, because the trustee can use trust funds to represent them when they're going through these different contentious conflicts with family members. So that's another reason why you don't want to have someone there who doesn't really know what they're doing, because it's going to just add to what's being taken away actually from the family as far as the assets and things, because they can't agree.
Okay.
So a couple instances, we've kind of brought up a few, but a couple instances where having a professional fiduciary step in would be most helpful. So one of those is, a lot of families that we're coming across, they decided not to have children for one reason or another. And so they worry about who's going to take care of them. They might have nieces and nephews and other family members, but really they worry about being a burden, and they don't want to be a burden on their family members. So what is good is then to bring in somebody like a professional fiduciary who can then serve in that role. And those family members can still be involved, but they just won't be required to take on a lot of the administrative and financial services. So it can help. The other is if there's tension in the family, that can be a really hard thing. And so I've seen where families where the parents it's their second marriage, and they have children each from their prior marriages, and they can't decide who should we put in charge. Should we put 2 of them in as co-trustees? Should we do that? Well, sometimes it can work, but more often than not, it can be a little bit of a problem. So that is another reason why people should look to maybe a neutral third party. The other is, and I'm hearing this a lot, is people will come in and they'll say, well, I listed my children as, my first in line successor trustee on my trust, but boy, my son is just not good with money. And I'm really worried about what's going to happen if he's in charge. Or, they've got unfortunately, maybe some addiction issues or things like that. So they're worried, I've put this person in charge and I feel like I need to keep, because maybe it's their oldest son or oldest daughter, and they really feel like it's an honor passing this responsibility on. Well, it's really not so much. It is kind of a lot of work. I call it, it's like a part-time job. And so if they don't know what they're doing, or they're not in a position where they can handle it, or maybe they're just busy, or they live in a different city. I mean, I have clients that one of them lives in Sacramento and one of the children lives in, or the parent lives in Lincoln and their children live in Sacramento. And that doesn't seem like it's that far, but when it comes to coming and meeting with them or checking on them at their skilled or their assisted living, they're not getting the visits as much, because their kids are busy with their kids and families. So it's just one of those instances where it's a job that is very important, but it's also one that could be trusted to somebody who's a neutral third party that could come in and step in and do those necessary things, who can be trusted, who's insured and licensed, and who's going to treat everybody the same. That's one thing that we have to do, is we have to be impartial with all parties. And so, we may hear stories from one sibling about the other and all that. But I'll tell you, it's just like any family. There's two or three sides to every story. So our job is to be the neutral, and we really are. I mean, we try and work through these things with all of the family members' benefit, for in our interest. So that's definitely something that we work on. So, and the other thing too is if a successor, they've already have a successor trustee picked out, but it's a friend of theirs, and they're the same age, or they have a brother or sister, same age, like similar in age. So you may not want to have that person there because, more likely than not, I mean, they may not be available. That's another reason. So, there's just a lot of different scenarios, but they're all just sort of equally important to kind of take a look at and make sure that this is the right path, so that you have the right person in charge when you need them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, too, if there's another successor trustee that's listed there, right, if they're unavailable, then sometimes there's documents that allow for someone to step in easily,
Yes.
right, as another successor. So, that'd be another situation where you might step in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are some professional fiduciaries that are retiring. Mm-hmm. And so people say, well, what do I do if I've listed you? Well, what do I do if you retire? And that's a very good point. And the way we handle that is that, so in your estate planning documents, you have the ability to list, multiple people. So usually 3 is the magic number, a listing. So you can, maybe list your kid, and then you can list maybe a friend or a relative, and then also maybe as a backup a fiduciary. And so then if for some reason all the people there now are not available, and even we aren't, you can either have it listed in your trust to say, well, we can select another professional fiduciary or select someone else. Or lots of times what we'll do is we'll have another fiduciary that we've been doing business with and sort of maybe using each other as sort of backup to one another. And we can then tell them, if something were to happen to me, would you be willing to serve? Mm-hmm. And so then their name could be listed behind ours as a successor to us. Mm-hmm. And so then that really is sort of a safeguard for having, a vacancy when you really need somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And worst case scenario, there is a vacancy and there's nothing in the trust document that appoints someone else. You can always go to court. It's not always going to be the most efficient, but you can always go to court to get somebody else appointed.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is always going to be some avenue to get through it. But I think the key is set it up right in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And, you're also going to be making some amendments and adjustments to your trust as your life goes on. Mm-hmm. Things change. You move, you get different assets, just things throughout your life will change. So at that time, and usually people say, like every 5 years, you should kind of take a look at maybe making some amendments to your trust if things have changed. And the other, so that would be the other thing that you could do if you notice that, like, I just got a letter that my fiduciary is retiring. That's another good time to go in and take a look and see if anything else needs to be updated in your trust. And we're just like any other professional, we will retire eventually, but like with a doctor or dentist, they'll send out a notification to all of their clients and say, I'm going to be retiring in a year, and this is what I think you should do. You can reach out to this person or that person, and I would recommend so-and-so, but you're free to make your own choices, and that's what we would do as well. Mm-hmm. So how do you engage the services of a fiduciary? Mm-hmm. So usually someone like Alyssa or a financial advisor they will say, hey, you're doing your documents, or we notice that maybe the person that you had listed isn't available anymore. Have you ever thought of hiring a professional fiduciary? And most of the time people will say, a what?
Yeah, pretty often.
Yeah. And so then Alyssa or the attorney or financial advisor or someone will give you about 3 names usually of different referrals to fiduciaries. And then you'll go ahead and make those calls and try and meet with them or talk to them and get a sense of who they are. I think it's important to interview them to make sure it's a good fit, that you feel comfortable, that you like them, and you understand what their background is and what services they provide, where they're located. And so how we do it at my firm is that we will do a 30-minute consultation. So I set those up and I give a free 30-minute consultation for anyone who's interested in learning about me. And right now we're doing those by Zoom or telephone, but soon enough I'm sure we'll be able to do in person. And that's where we get the feel, is this going to be a good match? And then if they do like that, my practice and feel comfortable with me, then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so when you meet with your attorney next, why don't you go ahead and, if you want to, put my name in the documents, and then I will send you a client questionnaire. So we set up a profile for all of our clients, and we gather all kinds of information about you that will help us if and when we are called to serve as trustee, financial, power of attorney, any of those. And we gather that information, we create a profile. And then from that information, then we'll add to. Once a year, we'll do a check-in with our clients and just gather any new bits of information that might be of importance, that they're going through back surgery, in the year, or they're moving, things like that. And so we keep track of them and we let them keep track of us. So if I move my office or something, I let them know at that time we've moved and this is how you reached me. So we're keeping that contact throughout, at least once a year. And then if my clients want to send me information about anything throughout the year, like maybe they've gotten some new animals and they have some new trust instructions about those animals, then I'll say, sure, well, send it over to me and we'll add it to your profile. So we always have a very, hopefully, robust file on you. So that way, whether we're called in 5 years or in 5 months, we have all the information that we need to act immediately. And so once we have that, and then we'll send a scope of engagement letter to you to just let you know that we understand in what capacity we are being asked to serve. And that just gives you peace of mind that we understand that you've asked us to serve in these different roles. And then I'll also look over your trust documents if you want, only really just to see what some of the instructions might be, or if you have any assets that I might need to make note of, so that way I can ask additional information, like maybe there's a business that I'd have to wrap up. Maybe it's a CPA, or they've got a grocery store or something. I might need to know these things. So I capture all of that too, because that's listed usually in that schedule at the very back where you list all of the assets that are titled to the trust. And so I will look through that and just make sure, and I'll also ask and say, and have you titled this to your trust for sure? Because it's great to list it in your trust, but until you actually go through the work to actually have it titled to the trust, it wouldn't really be a trust asset or something that I could take authority over when I needed to. So it's also another little reminder. So we look that over and we make our notes, and then we just go from there. And year to year, we just check in and see how our clients are doing. So the question. Everyone always wants to know, how much do we charge? So as a general rule, most fiduciaries charge per hour, just like most other professionals. We do not take a retainer, and a lot of us really don't charge a percentage based on what the overall estate is worth. Maybe some larger estates and people who kind of manage on a higher level, but for most of us, we do an hourly rate. And it's somewhere between the neighborhood of $125 to $150 an hour. Maybe some in the Bay Area might be a little more expensive just because cost of living is higher there. And we do bill incrementally, just like attorneys do. So attorneys might charge it 0.1 of an hour, 0.2 of an hour. And so whenever we make a phone call or go visit with a client or go to the bank, we charge for our time. And so what we'll do is we'll charge our time, and then once a month, we bill the estate for our time. Mm-hmm. Now, with a trust, if it's going to be one that we are going to close, meaning that the trustors die, and then they have instructions that we make distributions and close it out. So it usually takes about a year. And within that year, we're doing all the things like we're filing the final taxes, we are liquidating assets, we're selling houses, cars, distributing personal effects and family heirlooms and things off to the family, and we're doing all that. Like I said, it takes about a year to close it up entirely. And it could cost anywhere, depending on how much there is to do. I usually say like a rough estimate is about $8,000 to $10,000 over a year. And it might be less. It just depends. So if there's, maybe there's a family cabin or something that also needs to be transferred or things like that. So that would probably be about what it would cost. But that means that, like I said, it's like a part-time job. So we're kind of working, we're going to the bank, we're closing credit cards, doing all that really unfun stuff, especially when a family is mourning. They're going through the loss of someone. They're not having to deal with all that administrative stuff. So that's kind of what we do. And like I said, we do charge on an hourly basis. And then all of our invoices, we bill about once a month. And so if it's a trust, we bill the trust and we pay ourselves. That sounds a little weird, but that's how we get paid. But at the end of the trust administration, we make sure there's a full accounting available for all the beneficiaries. So everyone who receives a distribution will also receive a copy of the full accounting. Mm-hmm. And the accounting shows everything that we sort of took control over. So whether it was stocks or houses, property, things like that, and everything is included, and then it's liquidated, and it shows how that was transferred out, and all of the invoices that we paid, including our own. Mm-hmm. And we're going to pay attorney's fees, so we'll show the attorney's fees. We're going to pay for the tax return to get filed, so that will be in there. So they'll see everything, and it's all very transparent. And then once we've sent that out with the distribution, they have 180 days mm-hmm. to file or to voice concern or an issue about that. So it's all very transparent and very out in the open for everyone to see. So we do try and make sure that there's no mystery.
Okay.
So that pretty much sums up what I do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of interesting stories dealing with different family issues, but mm-hmm. for the most part, our goal is to be peacekeepers mm-hmm. and also to be protectors and advocates for our clients. So mm-hmm. that's kind of it in a nutshell, but every family is different, and so we work with every single one to make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah, and I am so thankful for everything that you do in those cases, because it really does make it so much smoother if you do have a neutral person who knows what they're doing
right.
and has done this many times, and so you're aware of what all the requirements are. I'm really proud that you knew the 120 days right off the bat. That was great.
I try.
Yeah, no. And so, whenever, you step in for those cases, they go really smoothly, which is great. So.
And that's what it's all about, really, making sure that we get everything done right and smoothly, and so that way people can be at ease about what's going to happen mm-hmm. after they're gone, or even if they're still here but aren't able to take care of these things on their own. They know that they're protected because they have a great team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, we can open it up for a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do they read the questions off to us? Or how do we?
Oh, okay. No questions? All right. Well.
Oh, well, you know what? Maybe we just answered everything so well.
Good. Yeah.
I guess so. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me here as your guest. And I want to thank the ACC for having me as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And my contact information is available there. I think it was on the last screen of the slide, but I'm sure if anybody has questions or needs to reach me, I'm sure they can reach out through you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.